Good afternoon. Hello and welcome. My name is Anne Leonard. I'm Manton Curator of Prints, Drawings, and Photographs at the Clark. I'm very, very pleased to welcome you and to introduce our speaker for this afternoon's lecture. As you know, we have just opened the fabulous new exhibition, Promenades on Paper, 18th-Century French Drawings from the Bibliothèque nationale de France. And this is an extraordinary opportunity to show drawings from the French National Library that have been very rarely exhibited or seen before. So this represents an opportunity for discovery, for surprise, and lots of enjoyment, which I hope you will have as you go through the galleries in the Lower Clark Center. I want to thank several entities and individuals who have made the exhibition possible. First of all, the exhibition has been made possible by Jesse and Charles Price. Major funding has also been provided by Elizabeth M. and Jean-Marie Eveillard, the Getty Foundation through its Paper Project Initiative, and the Samuel H. Kress Foundation. And the exhibition's catalog has been made possible by Denise Littlefield-Sobel. So I want to thank all of those people very warmly. And now it is my honor and pleasure to introduce Sarah Grandin, who has been for the last 2 years our Clark-Getty Curatorial Fellow, a 2-year postdoctoral fellowship she's held that was supported, as I mentioned, by a generous award from the Getty Paper Project. And just on a personal note, I can say it has been my great pleasure to work with Sarah over these past 2 years. Her energy is limitless, her enthusiasm is boundless, and her intelligence and erudition are also without limits. So it has been just a total privilege to have her as our colleague. And the exhibition and catalog that she's going to tell you about in just a moment are really very much her achievements, working with a great number of us at the museum, but it is her determination, her tenacity, and her enthusiasm that have really seen this project through to completion. So thank you so much, Sarah. And now to introduce her just slightly more formally, I'd like to let you know that Sarah received her PhD in the history of art and architecture from Harvard University in 2021. Her dissertation focused on issues of scale in the graphic and decorative arts in the age of Louis XIV. She holds a bachelor's degree in art history and comparative literature from Stanford University. And from 2017 to 2019, Sarah was a visiting fellow at the École Normale Supérieure in Paris, which is one of the most selective and prestigious graduate schools in France. While pursuing her education, Sarah participated in the development of exhibitions that were presented at both Stanford and Harvard. And so she came to us very well prepared, but this has been a partnership on an incredible scale, an international scale, working with our colleagues at the BNF, among whom I would also like to thank most warmly Corinne Le who is with us today. And it has been a project on a scale during a time period when travel has been complicated for reasons we all know. And so again, it's only through extraordinary efforts that the exhibition happened. And I think that the results we have to show for it are a splendid catalog, a beautiful exhibition, and Sarah's just about to come up and tell you more about them. So thank you so much again, and welcome, Sarah.
Thank you, Anne, for that incredibly warm introduction. I'm feeling very emotional now, which is not the best way to start a public lecture, but it's been such an honor and a privilege learning from you and working with you, Anne, and to working alongside Esther Bell on the creation of this exhibition at the Clark. Also couldn't have done this without the support of our director, Olivier Mellet, and the brilliance and open-mindedness of our colleagues, the curators at the Bibliothèque nationale de France, Corinne Le as well as Chloé Perrault and Pauline Chunier, who will get to see this exhibition on the walls of the Clark at various points during the duration of this exhibition. I also just wanted to quickly mention that this has been an amazing learning experience for me at the Clark. This is the first exhibition of this scale that I've ever had the privilege of working on, and I can't fathom how many people and how many areas of expertise it takes to bring works from across the world onto the walls in these galleries, and how many people it takes to bring a catalog into the world. So I won't name everyone, but I would like to thank the people in our registration department, all of our art handlers and preparators who protected and cherished these works of art as they came onto the walls and into our spaces, and also to our in-house editor, Kevin Bicknell, who was a real force and an incredibly patient person with whom to work on a catalog that entailed coordinating 12 different authors in French and English, all working remotely. I really encourage you to take a look at this catalog, which is on sale in our shop. I'm incredibly proud of it, and I think it's a beautiful work of art in its own right. So thank you again, Denise, who is here with us, for your support of this significant contribution to scholarship in 18th century French drawings. Thank you. And to all of you, I'd like to thank you for coming out. You braved inclement weather, slushy, icy, wintry conditions to come to the Clark to visit this exhibition of 18th century French drawings from the Bibliothèque nationale de France, the French National Library. The library was established in the 17th century as a royal institution, a status that changed with the fall of the monarchy during the French Revolution at the end of the 18th century. The Bibliothèque nationale de France, or BNF as it is commonly known now, has made it its mission to collect, preserve, and share books, manuscripts, medals, coins, antiquities, maps, prints, and drawings since its foundation over 350 years ago. And yet, drawings are one of the least known aspects of its vast collection. Almost 250 years ago, a young woman made her own pilgrimage to the library at the very site where it still stands today, in pursuit of artistic edification and visual pleasure. In 1773, at the age of 14, the French princess Marie-Clotilde de France visited a special room in the library called the Cabinet des Estampes. This print cabinet was at the heart of the Royal Library that is at the origin of today's BNF. The room is shown here in its early 20th century manifestation in an image that actually belongs in the Clark's collection. If you wanted to, you could make an appointment to see this print at the Clark's Manton Study Center for Works on Paper, which sits just across the hall from this auditorium. Similarly, the BNF's print cabinet is a place that stores prints, photographs, and drawings, where scholars and curious members of the public, including women, as we can see here, could come to consult images to train their eyes, expand their visual horizons, and absorb knowledge encyclopedic in its reach. Apparently, Marie-Clotilde was so enthralled by what she pored over in the print cabinet that day that her sister and governess had to tear her from the premises. So says the inscription on the sheet on which this small drawing featured in our exhibition is mounted. Not long after her visit, the princess submitted this exact drawing to the keeper of the print cabinet, Hugues Adrien Joly, to be added to the collection of prints and drawings by amateurs, or non-professional artists, that he had recently established. Marie-Clotilde signed and dated her pen and ink drawing of a picturesque landscape and rustic fortified chateau. She framed it in bands of colored wash to lend it finish and polish. It was a gift of thanks for the warm reception at the print cabinet, but it was also a calculated donation, one designed to secure her a place in the annals of history. I doubt she could have imagined that her study would have left the European continent, packed as precious cargo in a bespoke crate, traveled above the Atlantic not by sea but by air, and hung on a wall for the public to see in North America. It was framed and handled with the greatest care by a skilled team of professionals at both the BNF and the Clark. Surely her gift to posterity surpassed its original aspiration, which was to leave proof of her passion for drawing to other studious connoisseurs in Paris. This drawing is proof of the period's appetite for images and of the role drawing played in recording, creating, and transmitting them. This drawing's temporary relocation from France to Williamstown, Massachusetts, its extraction from the hallowed but relatively little trafficked vaults of the BNF and display on the gallery walls allows us to view this humble offering in a new light, one that shows the multiple intentions with which it was made. It was made, of course, for pleasure, the pleasure of creating something beautiful and accomplished. It was made for educational purposes, to refine her artistic acumen as a future patron of arts and letters. She was, after all, the granddaughter of Louis XV, the little sister of Louis XVI, and the future Queen of Sardinia. But perhaps of greatest interest is that it is a relic that retains its social currency. It was made not in preparation for something supposedly greater, a painting or a sculpture, for example, but rather as an end unto itself. Like many of the other drawings in this exhibition, this sheet is both self-contained and deeply engaged in the world from which it emerged. The objects featured in this exhibition all come from a single department in the French National Library, the Department of Prints and Photographs, which is the descendant of the print cabinet Clotilde de France visited in 1773, though of course there were no photographs at the time in the collection. This is a picture of its reading room today, which recently reopened to the public after the library's historic campus emerged from a decade-long renovation. This is the new garden that greets visitors to the Richelieu site in the heart of Paris. It is planted with bamboo, mulberry, birch, papyrus, and other plants essential to the manufacture of paper, the very material of which prints, books, and drawings are mostly made. This is a picture of one of the library's most magnificent public reading rooms, an audacious architectural achievement in glass and iron made at the turn of the 20th century, the Salle Ovale, that any of us could walk into today to consult a graphic novel. And this is an image of one of the new gallery spaces outfitted during the renovation, where one can enjoy everything from antique marbles to treasured manuscripts. While the BNF's mission has always been to conserve information and its artifacts for future readers, the library has also always been a site for innovation and imagination. This drawing, one of three by the architect Étienne Louis Boulet that is featured in the Clark's exhibition. So this drawing is one of three. This is Boulet's visionary proposal for a new hall for the Royal Library, as the BNF was still then known. While this plan was never built, its monumental scale echoes the all-encompassing ambitions of the library and even anticipates what architects were later able to achieve with the technologies of iron frame construction we can see in the Salle Ovale. The readers Boulet depicts are clad in togas, evoking the idea that France's modern citizens might be recipients of an idealized Greco-Roman intellectual heritage. Libraries have always allowed us to meaningfully connect with history. It is because of this historical consciousness, perhaps, that the drawings selected for this exhibition so vividly plunge us in contact with the past. The idea behind this exhibition came from a straightforward gap in scholarship. While the BNF has mounted exhibitions in the past based on its holding of 17th century French and 19th century French drawings, it had never exclusively dedicated attention to those belonging to the 18th century. Unlike many museum collections, the BNF does not have a comprehensive inventory of all of the drawings in its collections. Selecting these drawings was therefore something of an archaeological endeavor, a process full of discovery that led to new research on objects in the collection about which next to nothing was known at times. When our colleague and fellow curator Corinne Lebetuzet speaks of her collection and all that she manages, she speaks not in terms of countable numbers of sheets, but in terms of kilometers. She is responsible for millions of precious objects. In the next year, for example, she will have to move an entire kilometer of boxes and albums of prints to a different location within the BNF's complex array of storage facilities. In the spirit of historical groundedness, I will provide today some historical context for drawing's rise as a popular and cherished medium in 18th century France. And then I will walk us through the themes explored in the exhibition, themes through which drawing's instructive, creative, and documentary purposes emerged. But before doing so, I wanted to take a step back briefly to lay out what a drawing is, as there is an incredible variety of techniques on view in this exhibition that may be unfamiliar to many of us, or that we might even assume to be paintings, not drawings, because they're so full of color, so saturated and so vivid. So a drawing is loosely defined by its medium and by its support. It is most typically made on paper, but vellum, parchment, prepared calfskin, and various other surfaces and substrates can also be part of a drawing's structure. The techniques on view here include black, red, and white chalk, watercolor, ink and wash, graphite, and pastel. And then all of these media are used often in combination in various of the sheets. So that could be a fun exercise and training of your own eye to try and identify as you walk through the galleries how all of these pigments and materials are deployed in exciting and inventive new ways. With a selection of 84 drawings, albums, sketchbooks, prints, and optical devices, we rooted out from thousands of options. The term promenade that makes up our exhibition title is operative in two ways, both of which are at play in this drawing depicting a nocturnal convergence of strollers at a royal square in Paris in 1748. On the one hand, we find that this drawing on view in the Lower Clark Center, we find that the drawings on view in the Lower Clark Center allow the visitor to take a promenade through life in 18th century France in the richly textured panorama of historical events, quotidian activities, and creative pursuits they capture. In this drawing by Gabriel de Saint-Aubin, we can see people of different social classes and ages intermingle by moonlight and torchlight. These drawings also show us that drawing was an increasingly democratized, nimble, spontaneous, and mobile practice, one that a wide variety of practitioners carried out while on foot, in the streets, and on the move. This was the case for Gabriel de Saint-Aubin, the person who produced this drawing, who walked while he drew and drew while he walked, almost constantly, going so far as to draw in the margins of the written walking guides he carried about with him. The exhibition begins with the theme of drawing practices, and with a drawing by the painter Jean-Baptiste Greuze that epitomizes the most virtuosic achievements of drawing in this era. Through the dexterous deployment of red and black chalk, he leaves the reserved white of the page to shine through to give a sense of warmth and volume to the hunched nude's muscular back. The exhibition begins, therefore, with what we know and celebrate as specialists of 18th century French drawing about the period. It proceeds, throughout the exhibition, I would argue, to flesh out a world of actors beyond the male body and beyond the narrow purview of the lone male artist. Most of the images I will show today are drawings included in the exhibition, but at the outset I'm going to share a selection of images that illustrate the unique new status that drawing achieved over the course of the century. So I will signal drawings featured in our exhibition by including the library's logo at the top of the slide, that BNF acronym at top right. And for any other image I share, for context, the logo will be absent and the collection will be noted. So I don't want you to think I'm doing any false advertising up here by showing images that aren't at the Clark right now. So now, despite this particular drawing's beauty, it was apparently criticized by one of the great drawing instructors of the century, Natoire, who said that the figure didn't look particularly accomplished. And the inscription written on the bottom of this drawing, which may be apocryphal, says that Greuze retorted, well, he only wishes he could have done one half as good as mine. So this was apparently, this drawing was apparently the object of hot debate. But why would Greuze have even cared about the opinion of this Natoire? Well, Charles-Joseph Natoire was one of the foremost academic professors in the Royal Academy of Painting and Sculpture in 18th century France. He was also an expert in drawing instruction, and he had a real passion for the place of drawing from the live model as an essential part of academic curriculum. And this is the case in this exquisite and really vibrant and colorful and lively drawing in the Courtauld, in which he depicts young students hunched around alive nude models who are occupying very uncomfortable positions for long periods of time. But we can see the other kinds of objects that would have been essential to artistic training in the period, including plaster cast after antiquity, historical subjects in paintings on the walls. A student of art would start by studying models and then ascend to be able to work after the live model. And Natoire apparently so loved and cherished this particular drawing that he held it in his own private collection until his death. And Natoire was also the director of the Academy of Rome, where artists in France would go to continue their studies if they were so lucky. This beautiful painting by Chardin, who was an artist who notoriously struggled with drawing practices, gives us insight into some of the tools that a young draftsman might have used as he learned how to draw. He's holding a porte-crayon, which is a split bamboo instrument that would have held a piece of chalk, so that when one was drawing, one wouldn't sully one's fingers with the powder of black, red, and white chalks. He's working, as you can see, on a sheet of blue paper, which was a popular support for playing with light and contour in the production of chalk drawings. You can see such a chalk drawing on blue paper in one of the drawings featured in our exhibition. This is a sheet by François Boucher, one of the most productive and successful artists of 18th century France. He produced this capricious or somewhat imagined view of part of the Campo Vicino, the sort of the rancher's hill on the Palatine Hill in Rome, and it combines direct observation with some modifications that emerged from his own very personal imagination. He even probably inserted figures that he might have borrowed from prints he would have also studied at the time. And we can get a sense of how he might have used this drawing in this very small and intimate early painting that is now at the Louvre. You can see a young artist, one who's perhaps not quite successful yet, in a very dark and kind of somber studio. And to his right is a portfolio of drawings, landscapes on blue paper that would have served as source material as he produced landscapes such as that painted one that is on his easel. And in fact, the drawing on blue paper that is in our exhibition in the Lower Clark Center is directly related to a painting that is now at the Metropolitan Museum of Art. So this is a very sort of conventional way that drawing would have been used in the 18th century. This is sort of a starting point for understanding how drawing operated in 18th century France. It was academic, and it was used as a preparatory tool for a more final or finished work of art, such as a painting or sculpture. And yet, drawing began to emerge as an autonomous medium that was appreciated for its own sake by the middle of the 18th century, and this was due to a variety of factors. One of which we can see here. This is a view of the Salon, which is the biannual exhibition of the Royal Academy of the Royal Academy of Painting and Sculpture, where all of the members of the Royal Academy would show off their best productions of the prior years. And it's hard to see in great detail, but you'll have to take my word for it. But at the bottom of this image are tables that are draped in green velvet on which busts and even prints and drawings would have been exhibited. So certain artists by the middle of the century, such as Bouchardon, were not only exhibiting painting, which is a more typical kind of object to exhibit in this very official environment, they were also exhibiting drawings, which I think shows us that drawings were experiencing a rise in importance. Another example, sort of bit of visual evidence that gives us insight into the importance of drawing in this century. This is this fascinating object that's in the Morgan Library. Every page illustrates an elevation of how one of the foremost collectors of 18th century France, Jean de Julienne, how he hung all of his works in his private mansion. And if you zoom in on this detail, on the right-hand side, you can see two images framed in blue matting that are red chalk studies of heads that would have been produced by the artist Bouchardon. So So you can see that drawings were given were valued sufficiently to be framed, put and glazed, so put behind glass and hung on people's walls. But drawing was still very much the domain of connoisseurs in this period, as we can see in this trade card by the print and drawings dealer Uquier. So he shows us how many people would have stored their collections of prints and drawing, that is, in portfolios, almost as if they were books on a library shelf. And on all of the spines are written the subjects or the artists. So the drawings and prints that many connoisseurs collected would have been also organized in this manner and used for study. At the top of this drawing, it says estampes différentes pour l'étude du dessin. So stamps, different prints for the study of drawing, which shows us that prints were also being produced as a way to study drawing. And this is because there was an emergence of new technologies in the 18th century that were able to imitate not only the contours and motifs of a drawing, but also its tonal values, its texture, and its affect. We get various insights into the incredibly profound and productive relationships between prints and drawings throughout this exhibition, one of which appears in this first gallery. This is a copy that a student would have made after an illustration in a book, a printed illustration in a book. And this book was supposed to instruct those who wish to learn to draw in issues of human proportion and anatomy. So print and books were also vehicles for artistic training in this period. I just have two last examples to show you about, to share with you the intensity of drawing's rise and appreciation in this period. The first is the practice of one of the great collectors of the period, Jean-Pierre Mariette, who had the habit of framing all of his master drawings by Italian practitioners in this beautiful blue paper, which we now call Mariette bleu. One of his contemporaries, Crozat, amassed a huge cabinet of drawings, and he so valued this collection that he embarked on an incredibly complex and expensive editorial endeavor to reproduce drawings such as this sheet by Raphael. There was the first campaign to do this in etching with chiaroscuro woodblocks, and then later in the century, printmakers experimented even further with a new medium of aquatint to try and render these drawings and their appearance with even greater truth. So it is from this context that many of the drawings in this exhibition emerge. And the rest of the drawings I will show today are all those that you will be able to see in the Lower Clark Center. This is a drawing, or really a counterproof or an offset of a drawing by Jean-Honoré Fragonard, one of the great painters of 18th century France. He produced this drawing when he was in Italy. At this time, he produced a staggering number of highly finished sheets that copied paintings, frescoes, and other artistic achievements he witnessed. What was the purpose of these drawings? And he produced an immense amount of them. And what was the purpose of producing counterproofs of them, which meant that he would humidify the sheet, the black chalk drawing. He would put another sheet on top of it, apply immense amount of pressure so that a copy was produced, a perfect copy in reverse. And he would then revisit the copy. He would rework it, work it back up further with additions of black chalk in order to return intensity to the copy. So the purpose of these drawings was in part to train his eye and record what he saw in an era before the advent of photography, but they also had a social and economic value. So he would have been able to share a counterproof with patrons, with other connoisseurs, with friends, and this counterproof would also have allowed him to work up prints such as this etching that is now in the collection of the Met. So the intention of drawing was for it to be shared and circulated. And Fragonard and Boucher were certainly not the only artists in Italy that we will encounter in this exhibition. In his sketchbook from his Italian sojourn, the artist Anne-Louis Giraudet recorded the efflorescence of drawing as a sociable practice. So in addition to these more typical scenes that we might expect of an artist traveling through Italy, of the countryside, of flora, fauna, of antique friezes, etc., we also see that he captured this incredibly beautiful and intimate portrait of the opera singer Celeste Coltellini, who it appears she's holding that porte-crayon, the bamboo stick with chalk in it, and that she might be looking at a mirror and making a self-portrait of herself. And this is an amazing sort of eyewitness account of the fact that drawing was being practiced by a wider variety of people in this period, including women and non-professionals. I lied. There's one more drawing that's not in the exhibition. Fragonard produced at the end of the 18th century this illustration of a drawing lesson, which shows that drawing was practiced not only and learned not only in the halls, the training halls of the Palais du Louvre at the Royal Academy, but also in people's private salons, which means that children, elite children, and men and women were all trying to learn how to draw. This is a development that is amply demonstrated throughout this exhibition, including in some amazing drawings that we are fortunate to share, including this very small and intimate drawing that was produced by Louis XV at the age of 7. So as part of his princely training, Louis XV learned how to draw. There are 5 small sheets on view, and research that is shared in the catalog revealed that he was working directly after Prince. So that may explain why a 7-year-old was so accomplished in his rendering of architecture, because I don't know many 7-year-olds who could draw a building with such ease. The splotches look a little bit more familiar to me as the work of a 7-year-old. But yes, 4 out of the 5 drawings can be directly linked to Prince or drawings that he would have had access to from his drawing instructors. This is also the case with this drawing by his grandson, the future Louis XVIII, and we uncovered that he too would have been working from a model. So his drawing of a woman milking a cow was perhaps borrowed from another source. And finally, another fascinating suite of objects in this exhibition further shows the democratization of drawing as a practice in the 18th century, notably with the invention of a tool called the physionotrace, which was a mechanical aid in tracing a person's profile or producing a portrait. And there's a more detailed technical description of this object outside the case in the Laura Clark Center. But we're very lucky to be able to show the diagram produced by the inventor of this object, as well as the kind of portrait that is actual size, a life-size portrait that this instrument would have allowed someone without great artistic skill, perhaps, to produce. The next section of the exhibition is called Drawn for Print, and we begin with sort of a familiar pairing. Drawings were, of course, used to prepare images for prints, which is what you see in this pairing of an incredibly beautiful and virtuosic drawing by Charles-Antoine Coppel, which combines a variety of media, and the rather dry and academic etching that would have served as the frontispiece or the entry point for a book on the genealogy of the royal family. But we can also see in this section that new relationships were emerging between print and drawing in this period through the invention of new techniques and technologies, including aquatint, which allowed a printmaker to make areas of sort of stippled tone and to vary the intensity and darkness of that tone to imitate wash and ink drawing. So on the left, you have a drawing depicting in a kind of picturesque manner the stables of the Villa Giulia by Hubert Robert, and on the right you have a print made after it, but that really captures its effects, made by the Abbé de Saint-Non, his friend and patron. This was a cleric who was much more interested in art than he was in the church. And finally, in this section, we have another series of optical devices that show that people were treating prints as immersive objects that allowed them to travel even while they were perhaps sitting on their sofa in their salon. This is a pair, a preparatory drawing and a print made after it called a vue d'optique. And this particular instrument called a zogroscope, and we have it set up such that you can sort of look through it and experience it in the galleries, would have allowed someone to peer through the device and experience the print with a greater sense of depth. Now, this is very subtle. In the 21st century, we're all very jaded and used to, IMAX theater and whatnot. But this would have been a really surprising experience for someone in 18th century France. So be a little bit patient and keep that in mind as you look at the setup. The other fascinating device in this section, it's sort of a multi-purpose device, which when closed would have looked like a book and could have been tucked away on the shelf of someone's library. It could have been used as a camera obscura, which would have been a drawing device. So we're missing the curtain, but imagine that you would stick your head in the opening, put the curtain over your head, the mirror would have reflected the subject or the landscape in front of you. It would have been projected through the aperture on top of the box, and then through that aperture, light would have flowed into the box, and the image would have been projected onto a sheet of paper, and then you could perfectly trace it. And then this device also served as a zogroscope, as a viewing device to enhance the sense of depth that you would experience when looking at prints. So we would like to thank our friends at Harvard's Museum of Scientific Instruments for helping us set this up when it arrived, because we realized that we needed further explanation in order to set it up in the best way possible. The next section, the last two sections are sort of the largest in size and number. Is dedicated to design. The word in French, dessin, is also the word for design. So it seemed sort of an important and obvious connection to make. We have everything in this section from visionary, imaginary, and audacious examples of drawing, such as this beautiful drawing imagining what Newton's cenotaph or funerary monument might have looked like. This is the work of Boulez, and we can really see that paper was a site of possibility, of imagination, where an architect or a designer could have imagined things to put out into the world while being unfettered by the material constraints of a real building project. This was the case for another monumental set of drawings in the exhibition that were commissioned by another cleric more interested in art than in the church, the Abbé Lubersac de Livron. But then we also have examples of designs that were actually made, such as this costume by Bouquet depicting a member of the court dressed up as a Norwegian for an opera ballet. There are other flights of fancy that may or may not have been produced. We don't have evidence to confirm one way or the other, such as this drawing, actual size drawing that would have been a design for a miniature or toy carriage. And this drawing was part of a suite of presentation drawings that would have been given to Louis XV so that he could kind of shop around for ideas for beautiful decorative arts objects and furnishings to appoint the royal residences. So we can confirm, for example, that this design for a storage cabinet for his collection of medals was, in fact, brought into the world. This cabinet in gilt bronze and precious woods is now at Versailles. We can also see in this section, though, the incredible dynamism of drawing and of paper as a tool in this period. This is the case with this double-sided drawing by the designer and ornamentalist Oppeneur. This is his proposal for a design for the altar of the Notre-Dame de Jouarre Abbey, and he used both sides of the sheet. You can see that there were previously other pieces of paper affixed to the sheet. This drawing has had a long and complicated life, and while paper was less expensive in the 18th century, it was still sufficiently valued that an artist or a designer or an architect would probably have tried to use every square inch of the sheet. Another drawing that lends itself to considering drawing as a tool in this period for architects and designers is this design by the sculptor and decorative artist François-Antoine Vassé. And while we only have the primary drawing at left on view in the Lower Clark Center, there are various pieces that are still being held at the BNF that were once glued to this drawing, such that a potential, such that the commissioner could imagine different possibilities for the design. You know, do I want option A or do I want option B? So the drawing was certainly a dynamic tool that allowed patrons and commissioners to imagine different possibilities for their homes and churches. The last section of this exhibition is called Drawing as Document. And this final section explores the idea of the drawing as a documentary device. In an era when the study of the live model was officially the domain of men alone, some professional women artists were able during this period to perfect the art of depicting botanical specimens on vellum. This is the case with this incredible album that we have of botanical specimens by Madeleine Basseporte. Here we see her depiction of a hyacinth and narcissus. And Madeleine Basseporte was an amazing figure in 18th century France. For decades, she was the king's official painter of vellum. And this was the first time that a woman had occupied this role. This exhibition also offered opportunities for the discovery of figures and professionals who had been perhaps obscured or forgotten in the historical record. We have the pleasure of sharing these two beautiful drawings by Émilie Beugneux, whose life dates we finally got right, that we established for the first time correctly in the history of the art, which feels like a nice accomplishment. I really encourage you to spend time before this fascinating mineral specimen, which was depicted with such precision and detail and commitment that our colleagues at the Smithsonian in the gem department were actually able to identify the exact specimen as twinned boronite on chalcopyrite that would have originated in a specific mine in France. She was definitely working from a real specimen and likely from real shells that would have been in someone's sort of cabinet of curiosities in Paris. This was not the case, this sort of eyewitness and in-person experience of nature was not the case for these mesmerizing owls by Jean-Jacques Lequeux, who never left Europe and who definitely did not see these owls in the flesh, even though they have kind of an unsettling and unnerving, lively appearance. Lequeux would have been working from book illustrations in order to reproduce this, his own sort of subjective version of these owls from Cayenne. Cayenne being now the capital of French Guiana, so an outpost of French colonial conquest in South America. Much of this exhibition is very much focused in Paris and France in terms of its subject matter. But I do invite you to take a look at this album. The trouble with an album or a sketchbook is that you can only show one spread, so I would encourage you also to use the BNF's amazing search engine called Gallica, because all of these books and drawings have been digitized. So from your own home, you could go through every page of this album if you wish to. So this cacao plant would have probably been produced in Martinique or another island in the French Caribbean. And it is a testament to the fact that much of the wealth in France that would have allowed the artistic production that is exemplified by so many of the other drawings in this exhibition would have been based upon colonial conquest and extraction in the Caribbean and other areas of the French Atlantic. So the cultivation of the cacao and other plants that would have filled people's cups with chocolate and sugar in Paris were based upon the labor of enslaved individuals in the French Atlantic. All right, so it is perhaps no surprise that there are quite a few moments from history depicted in this exhibition, given the identity of the library as a place where history is preserved. So we have an entire wall dedicated to images from the French Revolution, such as this incredibly dramatic moment where one of the leaders of the French Terror, Robespierre, gets apprehended. He and his colleagues get taken down, and the next day are all guillotined. But we also have slightly lighter historical subjects. They range in seriousness, and they range in our ability to identify the exact moment that is depicted. This is a very precise moment when the Ottoman ambassador, Mehmet Efendi, would have stepped onto the steps of the Tuileries Palace to negotiate the release of enslaved Ottoman citizens in the Mediterranean with an 11-year-old Louis XV. And I can't imagine what was going through his head as he was being swarmed by throngs of Parisian onlookers on the steps of the palace. There are also moments of humor and levity in this exhibition. Not only the great moments of history, but also the fabric of everyday life is captured in various moments, including this satirical depiction of a woman having her hair done. Her older husband is simpering at her bosom and has no idea that the putti who are preparing her coif are also bringing letters up the ladder to bring to her lover. And the pendant to this drawing, which was eventually turned into a print, shows that she had quite the downfall. No one recorded the happenings of Paris and the texture of everyday life with a greater obsessive commitment than Gabriel de Saint-Aubin, an artist born into a family of artisans who never achieved official status at the Royal Academy of Painting and Sculpture. He annotated sales catalogs, and we have the privilege of seeing 3 of those in our exhibition. And by that, I mean, he would fill the end papers at times with illustrations, but he would also precisely document every work of art that went up for sale with minute precision. He would even correct titles or write down dimensions or write down prices. So his compulsion to document is a great gift to art historians of this period as we try and sort out provenance and other art historical issues. He also depicted visitors at public art events. This is one of my favorite drawings in the exhibition. It is also the smallest. It is a watercolor on vellum in which he depicts visitors, very excited visitors to the Salon de la Jeunesse, or the May exhibition. This was an annual opportunity for young, enterprising artists to hang their works outdoors in front of carpets and tapestries that would have been unfurled from people's windows and balconies. And this would have been organized every summer at the Place Dauphine. In Saint-Aubin's drawings of Paris, the subject of interest is not so much the individual human form as a singular, autonomous object of delectation. Rather, he captures the place of the solitary stroller and the charged tapestry of the crowd. His position in the thick of things and on the margin is summarized perhaps in the positioning of this young, hopeful artist on the fringe of the onlookers on the lower right, dressed in red in this drawing, who is looking up at the activity. His toe dips into the line of the bottom of the drawing, suggesting his dual status as an observer and an artist, not unlike Saint-Aubin himself. Across from the selection of drawings and annotated catalogs in the galleries of this exhibition are 5 drawings produced by artists and engineers who accompanied Napoleon in his invasion of Egypt in 1798. In search of a new overland trade route, Napoleon came armed with both soldiers wielding bayonets and scholars holding sticks of graphite. The 800 or so drawings of flora, fauna, topographic subjects, Egyptian citizens, and pharaonic monuments are now at the BNF. Rarely exhibited and little known to art historians, they show us that at the twilight of the 18th century, drawing had become a professionalized vocational skill used by the state. Drawings such as this of a colossus at Karnak, produced by André Duterte, would have been transformed into prints for a state-sponsored 23-volume illustrated compendium, massive in format, called the Description de l'Égypte, or the Description of Egypt. In the lower left-hand corner, Duterte depicts himself, or perhaps one of his comrades, staring up in awe at the giant ruin. Portfolio under his arm, he embodies confidence in his mission to document the artifacts of a civilization Europeans deemed, with no shortage of colonialist arrogance, in decline. Our exhibition began with Greuze's sensitive, sensuous, lively study of a male body. Its techniques are those of the trained painter. It belongs to mainstream academic instruction into the artist's atelier. While academies such as this continued to be made during Napoleon's reign and long after, we can see with Duterte's illustration of a colossus that drawing had been released from the studio and into the wide world that France was navigating and often seeking to conquer. The body on the left is imbued with Gallic pathos and the warmth of blood-red chalk, whereas the fragmented stone figure at right is rendered with a scientifically minded handling of light and shadow and with controlled campaigns of wash. The medium of drawing could capture life or entomb its subjects in a veil of purported objectivity. As the engineer and editor of the Description de l'Égypte, Jean-Baptiste Prosper-Jollois wrote of this colossus of Ramses depicted here, "Their faces are quite mutilated, and their forms are almost unrecognizable. The excavations that we have carried out around these colossal statues have provided us with a precise knowledge of their proportions and enabled us to draw them completely." The French members of Napoleon's commission believed that excavation and observation would lead naturally to knowledge, and then seamlessly to its accurate communication in drawing. This, of course, is a frictionless, idealist account. And yet, if we look closely at this drawing, and I encourage you to do so in the gallery yourselves, we can appreciate that while it seeks to possess on paper an ancient artifact too large to be expropriated, it does so in unavoidably personal terms. The craggy surface of the damaged stone would have looked different had the draftsman occupied a slightly different position or had the sun been higher or lower in the sky. Even when exercising empirical precision, it is impossible to entirely deactivate the unique eye of the beholder and the position he or she occupied. While different in finish and effect, this drawing is not ultimately as subjective as Saint-Aubin's energetic personal rendering of crowded bodies crushed in nocturnal counter in Paris. Even when documentary in nature, the unique gestures that constitute these drawings, unearthed from the BNF, with their intuitive strokes of chalk and pools of ink, should remind us of how personal and idiosyncratic the medium was and remains. Thank you.